Good afternoon. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. Welcome to the Time of the Writer Festival and also the book launch of Alternation African Scholarship Series, Volume 1 to 4. I will just want to start off the session by recognizing our partners and sponsors for this year's festival. I would like to recognize the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the National Institute for Humanities and Social Sciences, STEM Foundation, the Foundation for Human Rights, Hear My Voice, Institute, French Institute of South Africa, Amazwi, South African Museum of Literature, the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Arts and Culture, the National Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, and also recognize our Imbiza Journal for African Writing, who are our media partner. Just want to say thank you so much for the support. We're in the 4th day of the Time of the Writer Festival and tune in for the session. I hope you enjoy it. I would like to hand it over to Prof. Muletsane to take over the launch. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. As has been said, my name is Relebohile Muletsane, otherwise known as Lebo, a professor in the School of Education in the College of Humanities at UKZN. And I'll be moderating the discussions this afternoon. We have in store for you 2 launches, actually, rather than one. First, we are launching the Alternation book series, and we will get to that a little bit later. And secondly, we're launching the first 4 volumes of the series this afternoon. But before we do that, I'll call upon Professor Mkize, who is our DVC and head of College of Humanities, to say a few words of welcome and to talk a little bit about the Humanities Institute in which this project is located. Professor Mkize.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and good afternoon, fellow panelists and ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure indeed to welcome you this afternoon. I will be saying a few words about the Institute, in which many of the activities that we are conducting in the college are located. The launch of this Alternation African Scholarship book series coincides with one of the most significant events in the calendar of the nation and our national and African consciousness, namely the transitioning to the next world of Ingonyama Yamazulu, Ubhejane Phumesiqwini Umdlokombane. The College of Humanities hereby expresses our deepest sorrow to the house of Inkosi Ujama, the house of Inkosi Senzangakhona, the house of Nodumehlezi, Mbombosho Omnyama, Nsimo Dwavela Ngesiluba, Chininindi Omnyama, arguably the greatest warrior king and freedom fighter the house of Jama has ever produced, the legendary Princess Mkabayiga Jama, the house of Mtania, the matriarch of the Amazulu nation. We pray that the first read of the nation, Uhlangalum Mhlabati, be safe as he makes this arduous journey towards the land of his ancestors, and may he become a great Itongo to the nation. Vayete. Reflecting on the significance of this event is opportune for us, and more so because the book series is known as the Alternation African Scholarship Book Series. Of equal importance, therefore, is how do we insert the historically marginalized voices into the higher education landscape and to knowledge in general, including the contributions of African kingdoms in resisting colonialism. How do we prevent the COVID-19 pandemic from entrenching the digital knowledge divide? It is therefore important, ladies and gentlemen, that as we move forward, we need to commit ourselves fully to the unearthing, critical examination, and documentation of the historical contribution of the continent to global knowledge. This we need to examine dating back to the time that the Homo sapiens sapiens, humanity in general, stood on two legs somewhere along the fertile Happy or Nile Valley before migrating out of the continent to populate the rest of the world, giving rise to the many beautiful and diverse human forms that we have today. The current project is being rolled out in partnership with the Humanities Institute of the College of Humanities. Allow me to pause here to acknowledge the encouragement and support that we have received from the Vice Chancellor, Professor Nana Poku, towards the establishment of the Institute. The Institute will advance the African Humanities Project, part of which is to engage the humanities issues from the perspective of the South, bearing in mind the different ecologies of knowledge in which we are located, which are sometimes complementary, but also contradictory at times. The project seeks to address the global cognitive injustices and to contribute to world knowledge on equal terms with the rest of the world. So with these words, I'm very, very happy to introduce the Humanities Institute located in the College of Humanities, and also to introduce Professor Yanni Smith, who is our director of the Institute. I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mkhize, for those encouraging words, encouraging African scholarship. I will hope that young academics are listening attentively and are going to locate their work within that kind of thinking. I will now call upon Professor Smith to talk to us about the Alternation African Scholarship book series. Professor Smith.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Prof. Moletsane and DVC, Professor Mkhize. As well as to the,
you are breaking, Yanni.
Okay, is it better now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for this brief introduction to the Humanities Institute, as well as to the African Scholarship Book Series. If I may say one or two things about the Humanities Institute, it is a specialist project of the College of Humanities, and this project is aimed at the advancement at cutting-edge research in the African humanities, including the African digital humanities on the African continent. And we want to emphasize that we will have specific projects and project areas that we have already initiated in which specialist projects and research knowledge will be produced with regard to specific outcomes. In this regard, we do have what we have been calling signature project areas. And some of these signature project areas include focuses like the transformation of higher education on the African continent, African identity and social formations on the African continent, as well as topics related to climate change, natural disasters, pandemics, and so on. Another pressing area that we will be developing and that we will be researching is the world of work of young academics, also of young academics from the humanities disciplines in the country and on the continent. We think that it is crucially important for the continent to not only recognize the huge contribution that the humanities are making towards the well-being of our nations and of the well-being of our communities interactively, but also with regard to the huge contribution that academics are making towards the knowledge produced in these communities and the world of work and the opportunities in the world of work that are being generated on the continent and that we see can be generated, especially from perspectives of the African digital humanities in the future. And for this purpose, the Humanities Institute also has already established quite a number of national, continental, as well as international linkages. And we will be pursuing a multilateral arena of links with people who want to support but also want to benefit from the humanities knowledge and African scholarship that we are in the process of producing and that we have been producing for quite some time and that we will continue to produce as we go into the future. I may also just mention that African ethics, as well as health and healing, especially in this time of the pandemic, is of crucial importance for us and also for our communities. And much research is already being conducted in this area also during the year of the pandemic that we have been experiencing over the last just more than a year in South Africa and in the SADC region, as well as on the African continent, more widely speaking. So cutting edge knowledge production, that is what the Humanities Institute will hopefully contribute to. And it has already contributed quite substantially to cutting edge knowledge production in terms of topics as they arrive and as we are confronted with certain challenges in academia on the African continent and more widely afield. So with regard to the with this broad-based project, we also seek to develop capacity in the African humanities, capacity development, research capabilities and abilities of our young and upcoming researchers is foremost in our mind. And we have started with certain initiatives in this area, also including the very important specialized area of supervision in the African humanities, and the kind of skills and knowledge and content knowledge that are required for research supervision in the African humanities, especially as we transform, as the DVC have said, from this legacy of colonization and of apartheid that we have experienced in South Africa and Southern Africa, to a decolonized education, a truly African grounded education and knowledge that we produce on the African continent, and that is focused on benefits towards the peoples and the people in Southern Africa, as well as on the continent more broadly speaking. Finally, let me just say that when we talk about the African humanities, it's not only focused on the traditional arts and humanities and social sciences disciplines. We also raise questions about the natural sciences, the law and the information technology sciences, and questions about governance, which is extremely important also in our region, about the notion of personhood and the notion of the human that do play a role in these disciplines and in these sciences. And for that, in that focus, we have had quite a number of very substantial contributions already that have been published over the last number of years, and we are looking forward to much more substantive collaboration in this regard in the near future. Those are a few words just about to the Humanities Institute. And let me just conclude focusing on the African Scholarship book series. It is called African Scholarship because it feeds into this vision that we have for the Humanities Institute on all its different levels. And it is African scholarship by Africans, for Africans, with our communities, inclusive of our communities, knowledge that we produce that serve our communities and serve all equally. And for that, we are tapping into existing networks that have been created, especially since the very epistemically very important date of 1994 in South Africa, where South Africa could at long last also join the rest of the African continent as a free nation. And that also had reverberations throughout our disciplines, especially in the African humanities and the human and social sciences. So that is a very important focus for us. And to contribute, we support interdisciplinary research, multidisciplinary research. We support discipline-specific research, focusing on specific problems, challenges that we experience, but also transdisciplinary research. If I may just say that what we mean by interdisciplinary research is research that is focused on specific thematized questions, thematized challenges that we face on the continent, as well as on matters that we have to focus on that are not only located and limited to one specific discipline, but questions that we need to raise that are truly transdisciplinary, and also questions that need to be raised not only in the human and social sciences, but also in the natural sciences, law, governance, and also management sciences. Prof, over to you. Thank you. This is just a brief overview, and we can come back to some of these matters as we go forward. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Professor Smith. Before you go away, in the African Scholarship book series, each of the areas have, or the project has identified lead editors. Could you tell us why that is and what the role of the lead editors will be?
Yes, Prof. Thank you so much. We do have lead editors, and these lead editors are hub leaders in specific discipline and interdisciplinary areas of expertise. Now, the lead editors, it is on the one hand up to the lead editors to take initiatives towards the sourcing, developing research projects, and sourcing of research focused on specific research projects. And in that regard, all of these lead editors have been in such a position with other journals and with other publishing houses and so on. So they know how to do it and when to do it and what to do. So it's not people that are new in these positions. They know how to do it. That is on the one side, from the side of the lead editor. Then from the side of the general academic public, if there are academics that wish to also contribute to any of the projects that will be advertised widely, they are welcome to do so. And as we have seen with our recent publications around COVID, for example, there are collaborations from across the subcontinent in Africa, but also larger from Africa. And we have, on last count, more than 20 different states that have been contributing to publications. So from the initiatives of the general academic public, they will be able to identify and then contact lead editors with regard to their contributions. The second focus is that we will also be publishing monographs. And with that said, we mean that academics in the human and social sciences who have been working on a monograph, a single book publication, they will have to find and identify their lead editor with whom they will be working towards the publication of that monograph. So that will be some interaction between the lead editor and between the author or the authors, if there's one or more authors. And we hope to state all these requirements, processes and procedures on the website that we will be opening up, hopefully at the beginning of April, that people will be able to access. At the moment, we are housing the Alternation African Scholarship Book Series as in a sub-archive on the well-known Alternation Journal Archive. But as from the beginning of April, the Alternation African Scholarship Book Series will have its own website, and then we will take it from there. Thanks, Prof.
And thank you, Professor Ayani. And that brings us to the end of our first launch of the Alternation African Scholarship Book Series. We now move to our second and main launch, I suppose, of today, the launch of the four volumes, four first volumes of the African Scholarship Book Series. To introduce us to these four volumes, I'll call upon the lead editors of the volumes. The first lead editor is Professor Labi Ramrathan, who is a professor in the School of Education, and he led the editing of the volume titled Rethinking the Humanities Curriculum in the Time of COVID-19. Professor Ramrathan.
Good afternoon, panel. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon to all the people that have come into this session. Thank you very much for coming and sharing this afternoon with us. So here's a copy of the first book. The second, the third, and the fourth. So just to talk a little bit about the book itself, I, for the last 3 years, have been leading the humanities curriculum transformation process within the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And in my experience of over the last 3 years, there wasn't too much of uptake by the academic staff in terms of trying to transform the curriculum, especially moving into digital spaces and rethinking what they teach in terms of our drive to transform our curriculum within the whole transformation of higher education curriculum, as well as within the decolonization and neoliberal debates that's engaged across all institutions, both nationally and internationally. But when COVID-19 came about, there was a rapid, very quick response to change over from our traditional face-to-face and into the digital platforms to teach, assess, and get our learners to learn, our students to learn. And what we tried to do is to capture some of those moments, the early moments of the lockdown that actually propelled our staff into the digital terrain. And one of the chapters in the book really speaks about the agility and the resilience and the opportunities that made themselves available to actually move very quickly and rapidly into the digital platform. So the 3 years that I spent was upscaled and fast-tracked within 3 months into the digital platform. So this book, there's a chapter in this book that talks about this, but most central to the book, and when you talk about, Yanni spoke about the series trying to be on the cutting edge of knowledge production. And the conceptualization of this book happened just after the university lockdown. And within the space of about 10 months, we were able to produce 4 volumes of the book, suggesting that there is potential, there is capabilities, and it is possible to actually contribute towards the knowledge base in a profound way through a fast-tracking process of publishing seminal work. And the African book series allows us to do this, and we've demonstrated its potential. So coming back to the focus of the book on curriculum, we seldom ask this question, and this is really the fundamental question, curriculum question, of what and whose knowledge is most worthwhile. And especially within the context of this pandemic and within the context of South Africa and the global changes in terms of the 21st century, have we fundamentally begun to rethink what we offer to our students and how what we offer is of relevance to us here in South Africa, in Africa, and being part of the global citizen. So this book basically, my chapter especially, asks those fundamental questions about how have we decided what we should teach? Should we begin to rely only on what other people say, or as part of the heritage that this is what we taught, we must continue? We as academics have the agency to understand and to be able to propose curriculum that we think would be meaningful, obviously in dialogue with the community, the context, and the students. And so this book begins to question, ask those kinds of questions within this volume. A little bit about the authors. I think the authors that have contributed to this volume as well as the other volumes, they come from a range of institutional contexts and from across the South Africa and beyond. And this is what's interesting about this. It's not just a South African perspective or an institutional perspective. It covers a range of perspectives within the entire country and beyond our borders into neighboring countries as well. So the richness of what you read in this book brings out the diversity, the challenges, the issues that we're grappling with. And as Deleuze talks about rhizomes, you'll be able to realize that different things emerge in different contexts, but they're talking about the same issues and same issues, but in different contexts and not being influenced by each other. So this book attempts to bring that. A second thing important about this book is that it is an initial response to COVID. And as Yanni said, we really would like the series to be topical, to be useful, to have some relevance. And so COVID-19 had provided that topicalness that we can actually bring to the knowledge base and to the scholarship around the humanities curriculum. So in this respect, for example, we were able to capture the initial responses of individuals as they respond to the key question that this volume asks, which is, how have institutions responded to institutional closures and the protection of the integrity of what has been taught, learned, and assessed within humanities curriculum? So the chapters within this book really speak to those issues around that. So it ranges from how we conceptualized, for example, teaching and learning the digital platform that responds to the issues of closure, institutional closure, and integrity of what we teach and learn. So some highlights of this book is, there are some authors like Shan, for example, speaks about the beauty and power of disruption. Really a 21st century characteristic that all of us need to embrace. And if we cannot live within disruptions like COVID-19, then we are in serious trouble. And so this chapter really talks about how wonderful it is to think afresh, think anew, and begin to talk about different ways of thinking about it. Nokukanya and others speak about the massification of higher education, a phenomenon that has been a global issue of the need for higher education, and how the massification of higher education necessitates us to find new ways of teaching, learning, and assessing in confined spaces like university campuses. Crystal and Zainid talks about the agility of academics to change. Again, the question about what knowledge is most powerful, this is also Crane Sudin speaks about our pedantic focus on curriculum content coverage. So we really need to think about the curriculum has a fundamental issue around how we move and transform curriculum. Just one last point, which is really a chapter which I think all of us should read. And it's written by Ashwin Desai. And he uses the book, When the Machine Stops. And he uses the book as a way to begin to talk about how we should live within the context of a pandemic, within the context of a disease. And if we're stuck in our cocoons and encase ourselves in a machine, we might miss out on the opportunities that the new world presents to us. So I'll stop here and let others speak about the other volumes.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ramrathan. The second volume in the series is led by Professor Nobuhle Hlongwa, and it's titled Technology-Based Teaching and Learning in Higher Education During the Time of COVID-19. Professor Hlongwa.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Professor Moletsane. I would like to greet all our writers who are tuning in, but special greetings to our DVC and Head of Humanities College, Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, our Director for Humanities Institute, Professor Smith, my colleague, Professor Ramrathan, who was the lead editor for the first volume. Ismail Mohammed, our Director for CCA, and all the staff members within the Center for Creative Arts. Thank you very much, Prof. Moletsane, for this opportunity to share with our writers out there what we have done during the initial phase of COVID-19 in our space as academics. With the volume 2, I'm happy Prof. Ramrathan has gone through the introduction, and also Prof. Smith has gone through the introduction in terms of the AASBS series. When COVID took place, what happened was that government all over the world struggled, especially with higher education in terms of what to do at that time. So a state of emergency protocol was then implemented. And at that time, it aimed at restricting the movement and gathering of people. And that resulted in mass quarantine and stay at home across the world. So it was very, very difficult at that time to provide face-to-face teaching. So what then happened was that collaborative work of the group led by Prof. Smith, we agreed that it was time that as humanities and social science, we contribute towards publishing and towards knowledge production. And we used COVID-19 as the opportunity for us to do that and to build to the 25 years of the publication of the Alternation Journal. And we built on that as we were introducing the series. And just to go to the volume 2, which is entitled Technology-Based Teaching and Learning in Higher Education During the Time of COVID-19. Technology is actually vital. This volume focuses on the use of technology in providing teaching and learning in higher education. So technology ensured that year 2020 was not lost through the adoption of the new ways of teaching and learning, ways that were not used to, they were new to many of the academics across the globe, but especially in the country and especially in the SADC. So what is actually covered by this book is various benefits of using technology in teaching and learning. 6 important benefits are actually important to note. That, for example, that technology improves engagement of students in the classroom. It could be an online classroom. It also improves the knowledge retention, and it also encourages individual learning. And it encourages collaboration. In most cases, students like to work individually, but like with using technology, this encourages collaboration on the side of the students. And more importantly, students can learn useful life skills through the use of the technology. And as for the teachers or the lecturers, it has huge benefits for them as it opens up new frontiers for them. So in a higher education environment, Prof. Mletsane, technology can encourage active participation in the learning process. And this is usually a challenge to manage in a traditional classroom. So you will know, for example, at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where we are based, we sometimes have large classes, and it's very difficult to get our students to participate at the same time. But with technology, things are actually really changing. And we have seen that during the course of teaching using the online teaching. So what this volume has done is that it has documented experiences of university lecturers, scholars, and professional staff on the use of technology to support teaching and learning, including assessment in higher education during the time of COVID-19. In particular, the different chapters explore the opportunities and challenges of switching to online teaching learning platforms. So this second volume has 10 chapters. Almost all the volumes have 10 chapters. Just briefly to go through some of these chapters. The opening chapter by Nelly Mwale and Joseph. It's an important chapter that is a contribution from colleagues in Zambia. As my colleague has alluded to, so contributions here are not only from the country, from South Africa, but from the SADC, international scholars as well have also contributed. So it's a contribution from the University of Zambia in terms of how they have dealt with the introduction of e-learning. So these authors in this chapter, they look at student responses in terms of what drove the students in terms of the online teaching, what were the experiences and what were the experiences of the teachers in terms of using e-learning platforms. And it's a very important chapter to read to get a feel of what other universities and what other countries have gone through in terms of introducing online or using technology in teaching and learning. So is the second chapter, which is a contribution from Session and his team. In their chapter, they focus on the review of the current digital platforms and the digital tools. What they say is that it offers some commentary on the preparedness of lecturers and learners in the higher education sector to embrace e-learning technologies, specifically for practicals. We had a huge challenge when we began the online teaching, in that most of the practicals in many universities began late. Because we were cautious of the health protocols. So dealing with practicals was something that universities had to manage very carefully. So this chapter presents that focus in terms of how practicals had to be offered remotely. Then the other chapters also talk about other technologies that were also used. For example, there is a chapter that was written by Merisi and Pillay, where they explore how academics understand the possible opportunities that may be harnessed in higher education sector in the course of the present pandemic, and also paving the way for the fourth industrial revolution, while also fully understanding the many challenges that are there. So it is a very, very important chapter, because when we were talking about 4IR, people were thinking that how will education be like? Are we going to be ready as higher education institutions to deal with it? But COVID-19 happened, and it forced us to come up with innovative ways in terms of teaching and learning. So the other chapters by Andrew, chapter 5, and also chapter 6 by Nosipo, these are also important chapters that draw on the community of inquiry framework to argue for the use of Facebook. Everybody is using Facebook. As we are here right now launching this book, Facebook is one of the networks that we're actually using to communicate. So they are arguing for the use of Facebook. And the next chapter, which is chapter 7 by my professor Chikoko, he has made argument for the use of WhatsApp. And he has gone to explain how he used WhatsApp to teach his master's module successfully, which is a very good thing. So the social media, the other technologies that are there have been very, very useful. So in this volume, the focus has been mainly on all these technologies that have been used. The last chapter, which is the most important one, especially for this festival, Prof. Mletsane, is a chapter contributed by Sakile Gumede, Sipindele Hlongwa, who is the curator of Time of the Writer, and myself. This chapter talks about the Time of the Writer, which is this current festival. This was the first literary festival that was hosted virtually in 2020. We were only left with about 2 or 3 days before Time of the Writer took place. And the president announced lockdown, and we either had to cancel the Time of the Writer or go virtual. So this is a very important chapter where we document how we went about preparing for the virtual Time of the Writer Festival within a space of a few days, when for months we had been preparing for a face-to-face festival. Then we had to go virtual. So it documented that, and it also shares methods that we used, social media platforms, the Instagram, the Twitter, YouTube, you name it, Facebook, the radio stations, how they came to assist. And it's making important recommendations in terms of other festivals that came afterwards. And also it has made important recommendations in terms of delivering emergency remote teaching and learning in higher education institutions, as we have seen right now. Even 2021, higher education institutions are continuing to offer online teaching and learning. So these chapters are actually, the entire volume is relevant to read throughout as we continue to grapple with the challenges presented by COVID-19. Thank you very much, Prof. Mletsane.
Thank you, Professor Hlongwa. In the interest of time, we will move directly to the third volume, which is led by our very own DVC, Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, and it's titled Teaching and Learning in Higher Education in the Time of COVID. Prof. Mkhize.
Thank you again, Program Director. As it has been indicated, the title of this volume is Teaching and Learning in Higher Education in the Time of COVID. The corona pandemic, as you are all aware, laid bare many injustices in the world, not only in the health and economic spheres, but also in the educational spheres. Volume 3 addresses some of these injustices with a special focus on how both learners and academics and members of the professional staff have responded to the challenges of delivering e-learning. The chapters in this volume recognize that teaching and learning is not about the delivery of information from one source to another. Rather, it is an integral aspect of one's identity and as such, it should be considered in social and relational terms. In other words, it is a social practice. The chapters recognize that to implement e-learning fully, we need to come to terms with the social and cultural positionality of the learners, their situatedness, their identity, their social vulnerabilities, and a range of variables bearing on their social identity. Some papers or chapters argue that the events that were unfolding in institutions of higher learning were ultimately about power. Thus, provision of computers and data packages to students can only respond to what we call first order change in the organizational literature, where we replace one mode of delivery with another. It does not respond to what is called second order change, which involves changes to the schemata of the organizations itself, changes in the way that academics think about the way of delivering the curriculum, as well as changes in how learners think about the curriculum and doing their learning. It also doesn't look into how we can bring to the table the marginalized views and listen to them attentively. In other words, argue some of the chapters. It does not incorporate what we call the philosophy of Ubuntu. But we also need to move beyond that to realize that the challenges that were occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic necessitates that we put in place instruments to enable us to become a learning organization. In other words, it requires that we share our identity as an organization and together with our students jointly construe what it means to be learning in the context of COVID-19. Many of the chapters talk to this issue of Ubuntu, how we avoid marginalization and ensuring that no one is left behind. But I do want to quote in particular one of the chapters by Dr. Harry Masondo in the School of Social Sciences at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which talks or is titled Umuntu Akalashwa, meaning a human being is not dispensable. What this actually means is that no matter the challenges, no matter where the learners are coming from, we need to go the extra mile to accommodate them and put ourselves in the shoes of those learners in order to understand what they may be going through. Ultimately, therefore, institutions' responses to e-learning is a matter of social justice. Not only should it take into account the cultural and social and and economic positionality of the learner, it should also involve what we call both and thinking, which is basically trying to think from the perspective of the other and also incorporating the Ubuntu paradigm. From the Humanities Institute's perspective, it is important that we engage in this kind of discourse because, as I've already indicated, there are many challenges that we are facing as South Africans and Africans in general. The biggest one being, how do we deal with the question of cognitive injustice? So in a nutshell, many of the chapters in this particular volume seek to address that matter of dealing with cognitive injustice and ensuring that no learner is left behind. The challenges of ensuring that no learner is left behind are identified, and recommendations on how we can move in the future are highlighted. I thank you, Program Director. And I also want to thank all the authors who have contributed to this volume and the able leadership of our lead editor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mkhize. The final volume is led by Professor Yanni Smith and is titled Learner and Subject at the Dawn of the Digital Research-Led Teaching and Learning in the Time of COVID. Prof. Smith, could you talk about the volume, but also conclude with a word or two about how we take this series forward?
Excellent. Thanks, Prof. Thanks to all the professors and my co-editors. It was such a pleasure working with you through this difficult time. Colleagues, just about the fourth volume, you will see that the topic is a mouthful. And to a very large degree, all our volumes are just samples of research that have been engaged in due to COVID. All of us were thrown into the deep end with the lockdown, the close down of the universities towards the end of March in 2020. And while some were still thinking about what we should be doing, many of the colleagues have already started to engage the challenges that digital technology pose for all of us with regard to remote teaching and learning and remote research, remote supervision. And these were challenges that everybody had to engage, whether they were senior professors or junior lecturers, and whether they were also tutors. Everybody has had to think through the basics of how we engage remote teaching and learning and remote research. And that is across the disciplines, also in the natural sciences. And in this final volume, we bring together some papers that provide a sample of the thinking that has gone into the thinking through about how we continue to uphold the standards in our disciplines, also in the standards in our assessment, while we engage remote teaching and learning and remote research, basically through digital means. And all of the research that we have published have been produced within the first few months of 2020. The fact is, all of us have moved forward. For 2021, we are much better prepared. We have learned how to use the digital media better, from Facebook to WhatsApp to Loom and Zoom, and also through the eLearn and the Moodle systems and other platforms, many other platforms that have been explored in the sciences. And this fourth volume captures some of the initiatives that have been taken in 10 disciplines, and the 10 disciplines and or areas that we have engaged in and that we selected for this fourth volume are history, media, graphic design, music and dance, health sciences, commerce education, rural student studies, the challenges that rural students have been facing with remote teaching and learning, and then also differently able students, the challenges that they have faced, and also social work. So there you have 10 focus areas in this final fourth volume of these 4 volumes of the first number of books coming from the Alternation African Scholarship book series. Prof, I'm going to stop there. I see we've got 4 or 5 minutes left. If there are any other comments or questions, just a final word from my side. It was a great pleasure to work with everybody. I may just mention that there are still more volumes in the pipeline. And for some volumes, we have had more than 200 submissions of abstracts, topics, and so on, like also in the area of leadership, school leadership in the time of COVID, in the area of religion and COVID, in the area of rural rural education and COVID and so on. So there are quite a number of books in production that will come, that will be published in 2021, and also journal volumes. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Professor Smith. I was hoping that there would be time for a few questions from the audience or comments from the audience, but it seems we have run out of time. I would like to thank the audience for coming to this session, and would encourage you to contact the lead editors individually, directly, if you have any particular questions about accessing the published volumes, or suggesting an area that is of interest to you. And secondly, I would like to thank the panelists for their contributions, but also to thank Dr. Ismail Mohammed and his team for allowing us to occupy this space during this last hour. Thank you very much.